College English majors can't read. They have one job and they can't do it. The article just talks about what functional literacy looks like and what the distributions are looking like. And just more and more, it seems like even English majors in university just aren't doing their damn jobs. Well, I didn't read the whole thing. I skimmed through it. It's just bleak. Give me a bit. Ooh, look at all those numbers. Look at all those words. To summarize even further for those skimming, hey, they knew I'd be here. 58% of students understood very little of the passages they read. 38% could understand about half the sentences. 5% could understand all 7 paragraphs. These are college students majoring in English. About half of them are English education majors, which means they will be teaching books like Bleak House to high school students after graduating. But they themselves cannot understand the literal meaning of the sentences in the opening paragraphs. What do we mean by they can't understand the sentences? It's best illustrated with an example. The original text says, "As much mud in the streets as if the water had but newly retired from the face of the earth, and it would not be wonderful to meet a megalosaurus, 40 feet long or so, waddling like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill." And the subject, after reading that and being asked to describe it, says, pause, laughs. So it's like, the mud was all in the streets, and so everything's been like kind of washed around, and we might find megalosaurus bones, but he's saying they're waddling, all up the hill. Chat GPT brain? Yeah, maybe. Gonna punch my ticket. I mean, that text was kind of annoying to read. Well, the article might be describing you, my friend. Wait, I don't understand that sentence. Yeah, when the article said a significant number of college English students aren't functionally literate at that level, you're included in that, by the way. I'm sorry, did you think you were gonna get to did you think that like you, with your mind rotted by gotcha games, League of Legends, and live streamers, that you would be able to just effortlessly pass the bar that people who have gone to school in an English major can't clear? You sillies. The methodology is that an interviewer sits with each student one-on-one and listens to them read passages from the book aloud. As the students read, they must translate what they read into modern English, explaining what each passage means. They have a dictionary and reference material? And phones on hand to assist in looking up any unfamiliar terms, such as Lord Chancellor? Ooh, that's rough. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. Implacable November weather. As much mud in the streets if the waters, we read that, Smoke lowering down from chimney pots, making a soft black drizzle with flakes of soot in it, as big as full-grown snowflakes. Gone into mourning, one might imagine, for the death of the sun. Dogs undistinguishable in mire. Horses scarcely better, splashed to their very blinkers. Foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas, in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners, where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement and accumulating at compound interest. I don't think it's that difficult to parse at all. I don't even think the prose is that purple. It seems pretty understandable to me, to be honest with you. It's muddy? Yeah, it's muddy. Yeah. On such an afternoon, if ever, the Lord High Chancellor ought to be sitting here, as here he is, with a foggy glory round his head, softly fenced in with crimson cloth and curtains, addressed by a large advocate with great whiskers, a little voice, and an interminable brief, and outwardly directing his contemplation to the lantern in the roof where he can see nothing but fog. And then the subject says, describing him in a room with an animal, I think? Great whiskers? Facilitator laughs. Subject, a cat? Again, these students had full use of dictionaries and even their phones when reading the passages. They were free to look up and search any terms they didn't recognize. But these resources did not help them understand the text. That's a lot of words to say not that much, Lamau. That's true. I think literature should be about conveying... Literature should be like the word equivalent of Soylent, where you get like the distilled, like the exact nutrients you need as efficiently as possible without any care for texture or taste. London, Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall. And the subject says, and I don't know what Lord Chancellor is, some sort of person in authority, so that's probably what I'd go with. Sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall, which would be like maybe a hotel or something. So 10-second pause. The student is clicking on her phone and breathing heavily. All right, that sounds a bit mean to include that. Okay, so Michaelmas term is the first academic term of the year. So Lincoln's Inn Hall is probably not a hotel, laughs. 16 seconds of breathing, chair creaking. Then she whispers, I'm just going to skip that. This is a little mean. Talk about the November weather. Mud in the streets, and I do probably need to look up Megalosaurus. Really? It ends with Saurus. Meet a Megalosaurus 40 feet long or so. It's probably some kind of animal or something, or another that it is talking about encountering in the streets and walking like an elephantine lizard up Holborn Hill. So yep, I think we've encountered some kind of animal these characters have met in the street. Yep, I think we've encountered some kind of animal these... Did they copy and paste the last bit here, like verbatim? Or did she repeat it verbatim? This is just a bullying anecdote. Most folks alive today would struggle with Dickens. Yeah, most people on Earth today are functionally illiterate. These are college English majors. Probably not like day one, you know, freshmen, right? I mean, have you read Dickens? No, I'm illiterate. I've quoted the juiciest bits of student performance already, but you can read them all here, including the single example of a proficient reading in the original paper here. Yeesh. What does functionally illiterate mean? I mean, it depends on where you set the bar, and that's kind of what the article is about, right? The idea being that a lot of people have the literacy necessary to send and understand basic text messages, read signs, you know, like peasant literacy. But in terms of understanding, like, literature, they can't. And that's true. I mean, have you talked to people, like, online? Have you been getting a good sense of people's literacy lately? We should probably look at test scores. Test scores are awful at determining this. One of the problems is that we never fail anyone. Missing some references is valid. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with not knowing the meaning of a word. That's why they have a dictionary and like references up. That's totally fine. If you've never encountered a word, I didn't know what Michaelmas meant until it was provided in a clarification in this article. That's not really like the literacy thing. It's more like the ability to parse the meaning of these more illustrative sentences, right? You're trying to be able to engage with language at a level of proficiency where you're not just capable of comprehending stuff at like the most basic rote level of description, where you're like, okay, I understand books as long as they just say what's happening. Don't get fancy with it. Just say what's happening. It's like, okay, you know, I mean, we fail people always. Not really, actually. There's like in American education, like there's a big push to not fail students because universities and high schools get, they lose funding when people get failed out. So people will get like, no one gets held back anymore. There should be mass expulsion for AI use. Yes, but that's not what this is. This problem has been around for a little while longer than that. I mean, it's kind of like a creeping issue, I guess. Grading on a curve is part of the reason why. Yeah, I would say so, yeah. Like sometimes you're just right or wrong, and if you're wrong too much, they don't read very well. A study of the reading comprehension skills of English majors at 2 Midwestern universities. Is this older data? We conducted a reading test from January to April 2015. Oh, okay. We can't even... Oh, so it's probably gotten a lot worse then, right? We're not even talking about... No, wait. Is this really January to April 2015? Why do the research now? I don't know. Like I said before, I'm illiterate, so I can't read. They reading green eggs and ham today. Hey, listen, okay? As long as they're getting through the classics. People in my class last year were complaining Gatsby was boring and couldn't understand it. Really? Gatsby? Look, okay, I understand being bored by like the Grapes of Wrath or something, but Gatsby's Grapes of Wrath was heavy, dog. Yeah, I'm just saying there were some points where I remember it dragging for me, but you know, I only read it in high school. My brain's very different now. Because problematic readers constituted 58% of the subjects in our study, we'll focus our discussion on this category. The majority of these subjects could understand very little of Bleak House and did not have effective reading tactics. All had so much trouble comprehending concrete detail in consecutive clauses and phrases that they could not link the meaning of one sentence to the next. Although it was clear these subjects did try to use various tactics while they read the passage, they were not able to use those tactics successfully. For example, 43% of the problematic readers tried to look up words they did not understand, but only 5% were able to look up the meaning of a word and place it back correctly into a sentence. The subjects frequently looked up a word they did not know, realized they did not understand the sentence the word had come from, and skipped translating the sentence altogether. Dickens' rhetorical style is, to say the least, unfamiliar, so entering his world entails making imaginative leaps and consistently thinking on a higher level. None of the subjects in the problematic category had the reading skills to meet this challenge. Although many could vaguely understand the focus of each of Dickens' descriptions, they saw the mud and fog, for example, they could not interpret the literal, concrete detail that composed each description. A special challenge for problematic readers was legal language and information. Often these readers were also too confused to recognize that Bleak House begins by focusing on a law court. 71% of the problematic readers had no idea Dickens was focusing on a court of law, a judge, and lawyers. Their misunderstanding happened even though Chancery, a specific type of English court where the head judge, the Lord Chancellor, and other judges would make decisions on legal trusts, divisions of property, the property of, quote, lunatics, and the guardians for infants and orphans, Chancery Division and Lincoln's Inn Hall. Well, we haven't read the relevant passage there, so that doesn't mean that much to us. Oh dear. The original text said, fog up the river, where it flows among green aits and meadows, fog down the river, where it rolls defiled among the tiers of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. The subject says, there's just fog everywhere. The text says, fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out in the field, or in the yards, and hovering in the rigging of great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats. And the facilitator says, okay, so what do you see in this sentence besides fog? And the subject says, I know there's train, and there's like the industrial part of the city. It's, you ever get the feeling that it's all over, actually? Yeah, Masaigo, reading stuff like this does make me feel better when I get into 2-hour-long arguments with chat over some, like, inane moral argument. Because I have to remind myself, like, it's not me. It's just sometimes, like, I'm arguing with people who can't parse sentence structure. This is actually really depressing. Can we move on? Nah, it's pretty important. I mean, I think stuff like this is important to focus on politically because it's important. I think it's important to remember that, like, the societal decay we're experiencing right now is part of, like, a broader post-truth world dynamic that we're kind of swimming through, right? Like, that's the murk we're making our way through, an environment where everyone is just stupider, like, not biologically, but, you know, culture, smartphones, the internet, slop, memes, anti-intellectualism as a whole, I guess. You know, we don't really value being educated. A lot of negative downstream consequences of that. Does it say if they ever retested the students to see if they were capable of learning? Look, I think everyone is capable of learning how to better parse that sort of thing. It's just that they didn't know then, right? If you ever worry about your literacy, just read a few books. Seriously, read like 3 books, and your ability to weave language and use it like a tool will increase enormously. Preferably an older book, mind. It's like Shakespeare or something. Well, I think Shakespeare's incredibly dull to read personally, like unless you're going through it bit by bit in class. But you should go through it bit by bit in class. Read modern shit, dog. Yeah, but a lot of modern books are like written to appeal to a modern literacy level. You're not going to have your skills challenged as much by reading Stephen King as you would Dickens, right? Read fanfic? Do not read fanfic. One of the problems with this is that some of the most enthusiastic people, the most enthusiastic readers, all the like book talk types, you know, they're all on AO3 or whatever. They're reading like slop books written for people with the literacy of an 8th grader. You know, it's not you're not challenging yourself. One of the biggest problems in education is how we worship the past, and modern people can't relate, and many great books with complex language are written today. I mean, sure, you just have to, like, know what they are, right? Modern books are better, get immersed in the current culture of literature, not dead men. Okay, no, I think that's very stupid. Current culture is heavily influenced by those dead men. Like, they're literally the bedrocks. That's like saying, well, if you, like, you want to get into, like, art history or whatever, you want to learn more about art, like, don't learn about Rembrandt, you idiot. Dali, you stupid piece of shit. He's old. You need to find YouTube shorts where guys drizzle paint from a bucket that they have swinging from a rope, you know? I hate those. Yeah, well. You're comparing popular culture with bourgeoisie culture? Dickens is not bourgeoisie culture. Or what? Listen to yourself, okay? Just because something's old and white men wrote it doesn't mean it's bourgeois. Come on, listen to your... Run it through the filter. Dickens? They are being mean as hell. Oh, here, hold on. Competent readers. Okay, wait, hold on. Proficient readers. Only 5% or 4 of the 85. Nice chambray shirt. It's denim. Of the subjects in our study were proficient readers who could translate most of the literal prose in the passage and had the reading tactics to understand most of Bleak Hollow on their own. Okay, here we go. So now, because I know a bunch of people in chat right now are anxiously comparing their knowledge to the people in this, right? They're thinking like, okay, I know more than that person, but do I know as much as somebody who this study would call proficient, right? So let's see. I'm not an English major. In all likelihood, anyone deemed proficient by this test would be better than me at reading Dickens, right? They stood out because they continually looked up words they did not know. Ah. So rather than like trying to get the vibe of a sentence, these are people who have the knowledge of what they don't know. They're curious for more knowledge. So the issue isn't the comprehension of the greater sentence. It's, well, they just don't know every word from 200 years ago, which makes sense. They clearly had a better basic vocabulary than the other student readers. They could correctly guess, for example, the meanings of words like implaceable and pensioners. They could also, is this really a tough word for an English major? They could also recognize figurative language and avoided the trap of translating metaphors and similes literally. With these abilities, proficient readers comprehended many of the details in each sentence and could interpret successive phrases and clauses in a sentence to grasp its full meaning. One subject in this category demonstrated this higher level of comprehension. Vaush had bet cynicism prevents readers from appropriately appreciating literature. I would agree with that to an extent, yeah. I think a lot of people probably think that they're smart. It's like a long-term consequence of the curtains are blue type argument, where people are like, dude, my bullshit English teacher said that like when the book said that the clouds were dark, it was like symbolic of the depression of the main character after he lost his wife. Dude, the clouds were just dark. That happens sometimes. It doesn't have to mean anything. I've heard Vaush misread so many basic English words. You know that constant mispronunciation of read words is actually an indicator that a person is well read but doesn't speak on those words often, right? I'm just saying, attack me for the right things, because if the argument's the illiteracy, then it would have to be not knowing the meaning of the word, which I also do often. I'm just saying, be mean to me for the correct reason. Ameliorate. Hey, I think I used that word correctly. You just didn't like my advanced vocab. You don't like my $5 words, okay? Frankenstein's monster was just ugly. He didn't represent any outgroup. Dude, unironically, I wonder if you made kids read Frankenstein, how many, like, what they would get from that. I mean, you want to talk about like early foundational literature, right? I was never made to read Frankenstein. I've never read Frankenstein. I've read like a few paragraphs, so I get the I guess the writing style a little bit. I wonder how the people in this would take, what they would take from it. Vaush is stalling on reading the competent reader section. Okay. One subject in this category demonstrated this higher level of comprehension, and I'll read the text again. And we're almost done with this bit, by the way. Foot passengers jostling one another's umbrellas in a general infection of ill temper and losing their foothold at street corners where tens of thousands of other foot passengers have been slipping and sliding since the day broke, if this day ever broke, adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement, and accumulating at compound interest. So it's a simple passage. It's describing the scene outside, right? The weather, the fact that it's murky, muddy, the fact that it's dark if the day ever broke, the fact that it's not just muddy, but the mud is like sloshing and piling and accumulating and crusting, and people are trampling all over it, and all it's doing is adding to the accumulation. It seems like a simple enough sentence. Maybe there's something to it I'm missing, but let's read the subject. He's talking about foot traffic within the city. I said London first. I didn't say that out loud, but it's taking place in London, and he's talking about the foot traffic and how the weather is creating an ill temper between everyone, and everybody's jostling and fighting with each other for position on streets that are paved. It's not a pavement, it's a mess, so it's not perfectly smooth and level. And so people are slipping and sliding on cobblestone or whatever, and it happens to be, and he's connecting that with the past and saying how they're just the latest generation of people to be walking and jostling in bad weather through these stones that other people have gone before them and done the exact same things, and it accumulates at compound interest, pause. Adding new deposits to the crust upon crust of mud, sticking at those points tenaciously to the pavement, and accumulating, I'm assuming compound interest means it's interest on top of interest, so it's the mud is growing exponentially, if you will, and that's one whole paragraph right there. That's better than the rest? Yeah, did they miss anything? I feel like they got it. An actually intelligent person. I don't think it's intelligence. I think it's about curiosity and familiarity. Like, genuinely, you can learn so much so quickly just by doing some reading, and then you know more, and then you sound smarter because you're using language and skills that you've developed, and then it's like, oh, how'd you get so smart? And it's like it's a skill set. Isn't that what intelligence is, though? Yeah, but we have like essentialized intelligence to a point. It like worries me, right? It is possible to have a brain that is just not that fast, but that is not what's happening here. Like, our brains are more or less the same that they were 1,000 years ago, like in terms of the ability to accumulate knowledge and interpret the world and so on. So I really think that it's just a matter of familiarity and intellectual curiosity. Plus, we have the plastic spoon in our brains now. That's true. That's true. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know. It's just very depressing, I guess. Curiosity equals intelligence. Yeah. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Yeah, I do think that for sure. Yeah, it's correct reading strategies. Healthy skepticism goes a long way. You know what the f***ed up thing is? I wasn't gonna follow up on that. The f***ed up thing is I'm blanking on his name right now. Why am I blanking on his name? He was right alongside Elon Musk and Doge until he got kicked out for his gay, lengthy Twitter post about how Americans need to be more Indian. Vivek, thank you. He's been so quiet lately. He actually left my mind. Vivek was kind of right in the sentiment of a large part of his post. Not about how we all need to be better wage slaves or anything, but it is definitely true that in America, like, we have no drive for knowledge, like, at all. The only reason anyone tries to do well in school is because they want to make it big off like a crypto bag or something. Seriously, like, no one gives a shit. No one assigns any innate value to intellectual attainment. Which is pretty rough, like, culturally speaking. And pardon me for getting a little edgy with it, but, like, people will often accuse black people or, like, black culture, right? Well, you don't value education. Dude, nobody here does, right? The difference between the economic conditions black people and white people have accommodated is that black people understand that they're in an economically deprived position. The disdain for educational attainment is almost universal in this country. There are people who care about it. We call them foreign exchange students, and Harvard can't take them in anymore. Just saying. Natural consequence of American individualism? I don't even think that's true, because we had that cultural spark back in the 1940s and 1950s, and I think back then we did place a lot more value on the idea of being intelligent. I think it's broad anti-intellectualism. I just think that if you consume nothing but slop day in, day out, like, why would you aspire to anything better? I bet there are a lot of people who think that they're literate, but then could not read, well, Dickens, right? Not even just Dickens. I bet they couldn't read, who's a really easy author who I'd like? Kurt Vonnegut. Like, anyone, like, Kurt Vonnegut should be intelligible to people who are familiar with, like, I mean, like, 8th grade literacy, basically. But people get, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. It's not even a class thing, by the way, because the same thing is happening to wealthy people. The idea that, like, wealthy people are all, like, hitting the studies hard and, like, really amping up the knowledge is not true. Like, just flatly, that's like an old aristocracy thing. That's like an old, like, 100 years ago, you know, you are really invested in your children being like the educated one amongst the peasants or whatever. That's just, yeah, nowadays it's just coasting on wealth and connections. None of these people are showing up at classes, and nobody gets failed. Nobody gets held behind. They should be. All of you should still be in, I don't know, 11th grade or something. Is this just phone brain? I'm not going to lie, I do think that the more time passes, like, I feel like the evidence for it being phone brain is really, really high. Like, obviously, AI is a huge contributing factor, but I think there's, like, a broader... At the end of the day, education should basically just be you, your brain, your hands, a pencil, a paper, and, like, a disciplinarian staring at you. And some books? Yeah, maybe. It all goes back to Protestantism. I'm willing to blame basically anything on Protestantism. Yeah, for sure. How are we sharing society with so many people who are basically middle schoolers? Hey, listen, keep in mind, okay, we were looking at English majors in college. It's pretty bad in the United States. How old is this data? 2012 and 2014. So this isn't even like, this is like before smartphones being omnipresent in schools was really a super big thing. Number of U.S. adults proficiency on the PIAAC literacy scale and those who could not participate. 4% could not participate at all. 4.1 are below level 1. Level 12.9% are level 1. 31.6% are level 2. Does it provide the descriptions here for what these levels look like? If it does, am I literally blind? 5 literacy levels below level 1 to level 4/5. It's not providing me like a good key to this data. 2024 data. Well, this is for grade 4. This is like test scores for children. I'm talking about like American society here. In 2023, 28% of adults scored at or below level 1, 29% at level 2. Jesus Christ. 57% at level 1 or level 2. Anything below level 3 is considered partially illiterate. Not surprising anymore. Yeah. 59 million adults have literacy skills at or below level 1, the lowest level. 72 have numeracy skills at or below the lowest level. Gay people. 80% of people live in poverty, read at level 2 or below. This is like a really difficult question to provide answers to, and people might get mad at me, but like, problem here isn't actually the poverty. The problem here is cultural, because being poor doesn't stop you from going to a library. Like, it's not an access thing. Information is basically limitlessly available. It's not like, well, you can't afford, because I see lefties do that sometimes, where it's like they look at data similar to this and they'll say like, well, how do you expect them? Books cost money. It's like, don't be stupid. What about time? A lot of poor people have a lot of free time. Look, there are hardworking poor people who are juggling a bunch of jobs or whatever, but like, let's wake up and live in the real world for a second, okay? It's a cultural problem with apathy to a large extent, like anti-intellectualism, laziness, uncreativity, apathy. There's definitely a relationship between that and poverty, you know? I think that like if people have hope that their lives might improve in the future, they're more likely to work like hell to get ahead in that respect, which is one of the reasons, by the way, why poor people who are immigrating to America work really, really, really hard, right? Because in their head, they're like, well, I have the ability. There's a ladder in front of me. Like, I can actually go up that ladder. But a lot of people who are poor in the United States already don't share that mindset, possibly for valid reasons, because, you know, we don't have a high level of class mobility here compared even to some of our European contemporaries. So I think it's really like an apathy problem. It's an apathy problem. It's a cultural issue. It's a social issue, you know? About 65% of Americans don't read one book in a year. Yep. Not like I'm in any position to judge them. But isn't that apathy based on real conditions? I think there's always value in trying to like explore the world and learn new things. I think that's like the idea that you should only educate yourself if it might lead to a higher paying job in the future is kind of the source of the issue, right? Like we're taught, so not only will your life improve if you are more literate, like just factually that is true, right? It cannot hurt you, it can only help you. But in addition to that, it's like the idea that the incentive for being knowledgeable should be the financial reward, you know, that's kind of like the issue, right? Very dystopian perspective. I mean, it's true. It's just true. It's not really like a perspective thing, I think. It's just true. I hate that this study like tries to measure the consequences of illiteracy in money. Anyway, it's not a coincidence that Trump actually for the first time in a long time, Trump, a Republican, actually won over the low income, low education demographic in society. You know, it's there are like real political consequences to this beyond just a lack of personal attainment.